The life after death is a topic that has fascinated humans for centuries, and from what I can see, this fever isn't going away anytime soon.
The true nature of these preservation properties remains elusive.
And why should it? I mean, just take a look at mummies. They often offer a glimpse into ancient cultures and reveal their beliefs and practices.
Gracefully than the other mummies, but it's probably because she's also an older patient.
The bodies and the items buried with them show what people valued, their spiritual symbols, and their views on life after death. So, would you like to take a closer look at some of the most interesting frozen mummies? Let's get into it. Number 20. The Tigil Princess. The Tigil Princess is a woman who is over 800 million years old. This woman, or should I say mummy, single-handedly threw Russia into a frenzy upon discovery. But who is the Tigil Princess? Let's find out together. The princess was laid to rest in the remote Siberian village of Rzhavchik, and that's where she was found millions of years later. The discovery of the sarcophagus was made in 1969 by a miner named Ivan Karnaukov. The miners had come across what appeared to be a marble sarcophagus, stuck deep in the earth at a depth of 70 meters. Determined to uncover what was inside the sarcophagus, the miners opened it. They were expecting to find gold objects and precious stones, but that's not what they found. Instead, inside the marble sarcophagus, they found a young woman. She was submerged in a strange pink liquid. She was like a real-life Sleeping Beauty. At first glance, she appeared to be around 25 to 30 years old and about 170 to 180 centimeters tall. She was wearing a white dress made of a material that was unique and unknown to us. Next to her head was a small black metal box. At first glance, it looked like a modern smartphone, but no one could identify exactly what it was. One of the miners, quite recklessly, dipped his finger in the liquid and tasted it. The following week was like a nightmare for him. He lost his mind. The man died in the harsh Siberian winter, unable to even understand what had happened to him. Just a few hours after the princess was discovered, men in gray suits appeared out of nowhere. They did everything in their power to cover up anything related to this unusual discovery. Later, a scientist in Novosibirsk made some hypotheses and speculations. He claimed the princess was hundreds of millions of years old. According to him, the pink liquid and the fabric of her clothes were an unexplainable mystery that science had yet to unpack. The local newspaper published a brief article about the discovery. Just when everyone thought that was the last they would hear of the princess, something unexpected happened. The men in gray suits returned to the town and began searching buildings and homes. They confiscated all copies of the publication containing the article. This raises questions. What did they find out from the mummy? And why are the men in gray suits so adamant about keeping the truth from coming out? Who is this princess and where did she come from? The truth may never be known. But, oh boy, people have their own theories about this. I'd also love to hear what you think about all of it. Comment down below and let me know. Number 19. Siberian Ice Maiden. Now, you guys will be completely off the mark if you think that the Tigil Princess was the only mummified princess to come out of Siberia, because there was also another. She was the Yuka Princess, also known as the Siberian Ice Maiden. This woman was clearly someone important during her time. How do I know that? Well, all you have to do is take a look at her tomb and burial. She was found buried in a grand large coffin. And not only that, there were also 6 sacrificial horses laid to rest around her. Now that's what we call resting in style. She was part of the ancient Pazyryk culture, which was linked to the Scythians of Siberia, which means she lived around the 5th century BC. She was about 25 years old when she died. According to a 1998 Nova documentary, her embalming was next level intense. Peat preservation, brain and eyes removed, and fur stuffed in her eye sockets. Kind of a weird flex, but okay. Her tattoos are the real stars of the show. The maiden's tattoos include a deer's head, a spotted panther, and a leaping deer with a griffin's beak and antlers that branch into flowery form. And get this, even her wardrobe told a story about the Pazyryk people. They lived between the 6th and 3rd centuries BCE. Her blouse? Made of wild silk that likely came all the way from India. Yep, they were trading across continents 2,400 years ago. How amazing is it to know little details about people who lived thousands of years ago? Number 18, 3,500-year-old mummified bear. In 2020, reindeer hunters made an incredible discovery, a perfectly preserved bear carcass. It had been frozen for millennia in Siberian permafrost. It was found on Bolshoi Lyakhovsky Island in the Arctic. The bear's fur, skin, claws, teeth, internal organs, and even its nose were intact. This was a rarity, according to paleontologist Lena Grigorieva. It was initially thought to be an extinct cave bear from the Ice Age, but radiocarbon dating revealed it was actually a 3,460-year-old brown bear. Yes, you heard that right. Researchers conducted a necropsy and it revealed that the bear was a 5.1-foot tall, 172-pound female. It was about 2 to 3 years old when it died. Evidence of spinal injuries was found, but the cause of death still remains unknown. Thanks to science, we even know what the bear's final meal was. The Siberian permafrost had even partially preserved its stomach contents. Inside, they found the remnants of unidentified plants and bird feathers. How the bear reached the island, 30 miles from the mainland, is still unknown. It may have swum, crossed over sea ice, or traveled when the island was connected to the continent. Who knows? Number 17, frozen Yuka mammoth mummy. In August 2010, researchers discovered Yuka. It is a 39,000-year-old woolly mammoth which was frozen in Siberian permafrost. Yuka was exceptionally well preserved. Some of its reddish fur is still intact, but the most interesting piece of information is that it had a complete brain, the first and only preserved mammoth brain ever found. When scientists examined the specimen, they found remains of soft tissue on the skull.
From its size, it looks as though this mammoth was about 3 or 4 years old when it died.
And a well-preserved dura mater. It is the dense membrane protecting the brain and spinal cord. The brain's structure, along with visible vessels and sinuses, was a groundbreaking find in paleoneurology. This offered a look into the nervous system of this extinct species. How cool is that? Number 16, the Inca maiden. The Inca maiden, also known as Juanita, is the extremely well-preserved mummy of a young girl who was sacrificed in a ritual over 500 years ago. She was discovered in 1995 by anthropologist Johann Reinhard and climber Miguel Zarate on Peru's Amparo volcano. Her frozen body was revealed by melting ice caused by volcanic activity. She was found at an elevation of 6,400 meters. Despite that fact, Juanita's internal organs, skin, and hair were impressively intact.
A study done on hair cuttings buried with the girl revealed that her hair was elaborately braided just before she died.
Along with her, there were also offerings like ceramics and llama bone. Juanita was believed to be 12 to 15 years old at the time of her sacrifice, which took place between AD 1440 and 1450. She was likely from a noble family in Cusco. As an Acele or chosen woman, she most likely held special status in Inca society and was offered to appease the gods for prosperity. Number 15, human-like ape. The modern-day corpse of a human-like hominid, preserved in a block of ice, encountered by researchers in the 1960s, you say. That's the Minnesota Iceman. He is the massive human-like ape that keeps fueling the rumors that creatures like Bigfoot are alive and well in the modern world. The Iceman belonged to an exhibitor named Frank Hansen during the 60s and 70s. Now, of course, a discovery like this attracted many scientists and zoologists. Among these were two zoologists named Ivan T. Sanderson and Bernard Heuvelman. In December 1968, Sanderson and Heuvelmans looked at the Iceman at Hansen's house. After examining it, both were sure the creature was real. They were so convinced that they created detailed drawings and planned to have it described in scientific papers. Heuvelmans even gave it a scientific name. He called it Homo pongoides. Sadly, people today do not believe the story of the Minnesota Iceman exactly, and it is all due to Frank Hansen's less than believable accounts of how and where the Iceman was found. Maybe if he had stuck to a single story, more people would have believed him. Number 14, Ötzi the Iceman. At first glance, Ötzi doesn't really look like much. In fact, he was so ordinary looking that when Ötzi the Iceman was discovered in the Alps in 1991, Austrian authorities initially thought he was a modern mountaineer, just because his body was remarkably well preserved. However, after quickly extracting him from the glacier, they realized he had lived over 5,000 years ago.
It's a window into what life looked like 5,000 years ago in Europe. So it's kind of like finding the Ark of the Covenant. How important is that? Yeah, it's pretty important.
That too during the Copper Age. Ötzi lived in a time when Europe was just beginning to form complex social structure. His death, however, was anything but peaceful. He was shot with an arrow and likely suffered a fatal head injury. Research from 2013 revealed these brutal details. The mummified man has revealed countless details about life during the Copper Age. His DNA shows he was native to Central Europe, and his stomach contents indicate he lived on ibex meat. In his mid-40s, around the time of his death, Ötzi suffered from arthritis, clogged arteries, and intestinal parasites. Quite interestingly, the tools he carried were recently sharpened, leaving us to wonder, was he preparing for a routine task or bracing for an upcoming confrontation? I have to say Ötzi's life and death is quite interesting, don't you think? Number 13, Stucky, the mummified dog. Chasing after a raccoon landed this dog in a pickle, or should I say tree? A hunting dog, Mr. Stucky, was chasing after a raccoon and became trapped in the tree. The harder poor Stucky fought to free itself, the tighter the tree held on. With no escape, Stucky passed away mid-struggle and was mummified in motion. For nearly 20 years, the dog remained hidden 30 feet above the forest floor. Fast forward to 1980, when a logging crew stumbled upon the bizarre discovery. When they cut through the chestnut oak, they were stunned to find the remarkably intact remains of the dog. But the story gets even weirder. Instead of sending the tree to the sawmill, the loggers donated it to Forest World. Scientists later figured out how Stucky stayed so well preserved. A breeze through the hollow tree acted like a chimney. It carried away the smell of decay and kept bugs from finding the body. The tree's natural tannic acid helped dry out the dog's skin, while the trunk kept the conditions dry and protected. Macabre? Sure. Poignant? Absolutely. Fascinating? Without a doubt. This story is so wild it can only be true. Number 12, 2,400-year-old corpse. This is a man who never decomposed. Yes, the Tollund man is an all-natural mummy. He is 2,400 years old and was discovered in 1950 in a peat bog on Denmark's Jutland Peninsula. The reason his body is so well preserved is due to the acidic, oxygen-free environment of the bog. This stopped it from decaying. The coolest part about this natural mummification is that it allowed scientists to study his body and even access his fingerprints. The Tollund man lived during the Iron Age. He was about 1.80 meters tall, with dark brown hair and a beard. Examinations show he was likely between 30 and 40 years old when he died. A leather cord mark around his neck suggests he was hanged. Autopsy results also confirm that his death was sudden and violent. He was found wearing a leather cap, cloak, and trousers, all well preserved. The Tollund man's last meal, as discovered in his stomach, consisted of oatmeal, porridge, and fish. Poor guy. Number 11, mummified monster. Name anything more ironic than a mummified monster being discovered in a diamond pit. I'll wait. A strange mummified creature has been discovered inside a diamond mine in the Sakha Republic of northern Siberia. This monster could be between 252 and 66 million years old. This estimate is based on the age of the sand deposits where it was found. The miners discovered the remains while working at the Udashnaya pipe diamond mine. The mine has been active since 1955 and has yielded millions of tons of ore with rough diamonds. But nothing compares to the bizarre mummified creature recently uncovered. At first, the miners thought they had found the remains of an unknown species of dinosaur. However, this theory still needs more evidence. Other possibilities include the remains of a wolverine, a carnivorous mammal that looks like a small bear, or a marten, another agile mammal that lives in Siberia's snowy forests. But who knows? Your guess is as good as mine. Number 10, trapped in a tree bark. Being buried in a tree bark is quite odd even for the olden time. So, why was this particular mummy found wrapped up in a tree? Archaeologists made this discovery near Salakhard, Russia, just 18 miles south of the Arctic Circle. The mummy was wrapped up snugly in a birch bark cocoon. This mummy was most likely a child or teenager from the 12th or 13th century and came from Zeleny Yar. And trust me, Zeleny Yar is a can of worms that you do not want to open. Oh, and get this, artifacts found nearby, like bronze bowls, hint that the villagers had ties to Persia, which is 3,700 miles away. Pretty fancy, am I right? The mummy was naturally preserved thanks to copper sheets in its shroud in the frosty ground. This created the perfect freezer for 800 years. The birch bark cocoon, about 4 feet long, hugs the body so well that scientists think the skull and head may be in great shape. For now, the mummy is safely chilling in a freezer at the Shimanovsky Museum. Number 9, mummies in a cave. These mummies were made by accident? Yup, that's right. The Greenland mummies were discovered in 1972 at Chilakitsoq and are completely natural, which was made possible by the freezing temperatures. They date back to around AD 1475. The remains were found in 2 graves. They include 6 women and 2 children. The discovery was made by 2 hunters, Hans and Joachim Gronwald. 4 of the mummies, 3 women and a young child, were very well preserved. This allowed researchers to study them non-destructively. 5 of the 6 women had traditional Inuit tattoos, with black or blue facial lines over their eyebrows, cheeks, and beneath their chin. 2 also had tattooed dots on their forehead. The cause of death is not yet known. Researchers speculated the group might have drowned, but the evidence didn't support this. They determined that one woman died from a malignant tumor, while the older child suffered from a hip disease. What's even more tragic is that the 6-month-old child was likely buried alive, as Inuit customs of the time dictated if no wet nurse was available. Number 8. An American mummy. What would you do if a hanging mannequin at work turned out to be a real mummified corpse? I'd most probably run out of there and never return. And this was no ordinary mummy. This was the mummy of an outlaw from the early 1900s. A failed outlaw, but an outlaw nonetheless. This was the body of Elmer McCurdy.
McCurdy's body was finally laid to rest in 1977 in Guthrie, Oklahoma.
Elmer's life was a string of disasters. After a troubled childhood and a stint in the army, he tried robbing trains and banks, but botched every heist. His final stand ended in a shootout, and with no one to claim his body, he was embalmed and displayed as a sideshow attraction. Carnival owners, posing as his long-lost brothers, stole his corpse and turned it into a traveling exhibit. Over decades, Elmer's body changed hands. It appeared in carnivals, exploitation film, and eventually a fun house ride where his identity was forgotten. After the discovery in 1977, he was finally laid to rest in Oklahoma. Poor guy was buried under 2 feet of concrete to protect him. Let's hope he's finally allowed to rest in peace now. Number 7. 40,000-year-old horse. In August 2018, mammoth tusk hunters made an incredible discovery in Siberia's Baga crater. They found the nearly intact remains of a 42,000-year-old foal. The foal had been preserved in permafrost. Its skin, hooves, tail, and some hair were still intact. Researchers from Russia's Northeastern Federal University and South Korea's Suwon Biotech made an exciting discovery. They extracted liquid blood and urine from the foal. Now, this definitely raised hopes of cloning the extinct Lenskaya horse. The foal, just 1 to 2 weeks old, likely drowned in mud that later froze. The blood sample is 27,000 years older than a similar find from a woolly mammoth in 2013. But lead researcher Lena Grigorieva doubts it's viable for cloning, as blood cells lack nuclei with DNA. Scientists are now searching for intact cells in the foal's preserved tissue. This is one of the most exciting things I've heard in a while. What about you? Number 6. Most beautiful mummy in the world. This is the most beautiful mummy in the world. In the Capuchin catacombs of Palermo lies the mummified body of 2-year-old Rosalia Lombardo, known as the Sleeping Beauty. She died of pneumonia in 1920. Her heartbroken father, Mario Lombardo, sought the help of embalmer Alfredo Salafia to preserve her forever. Nearly a century later, Rosalia remains one of the most astonishingly preserved mummies in the world. She rests peacefully in a glass coffin under a silk blanket. X-rays reveal that Rosalia's organs are still intact, though signs of decay prompted her coffin to be moved to a drier spot and sealed with nitrogen gas to prevent further decomposition. Rosalia also inspired a spooky myth that she opens her eyes daily. Thousands come to see her eye-opening phenomenon, but anthropologist Dario Piombino Mascali solved the mystery. It's an optical illusion caused by light filtering through the room. Nothing beats a father's love for his daughter, am I right? Number 5. Queen Hatshepsut's mummy. Hatshepsut was one of Egypt's most powerful female pharaohs. She ruled during the 18th dynasty, and her reign was marked by monumental achievement. While her tomb and monuments were found, her mummy's identity remained a secret for decades. In 1903, Howard Carter discovered 2 mummies in tomb Cave Viv 60 in the Valley of the King, one in a coffin and the other stretched on the floor. The tomb had been looted in antiquity, and Carter dismissed it as insignificant. Decades later, during the Egyptian Mummy Project, scientists re-examined the mummies using CT scans and DNA analysis. A breakthrough came when a canopic box inscribed for Hatshepsut was found containing a tooth. This tooth fit perfectly into the jaw of one of the mummies, and voila. Just like that, her identity was confirmed. Hatshepsut's mummy revealed she died around age 50, possibly from cancer, obesity, and diabetes. Her name was erased from history after her death, most likely by her stepson in an act of revenge. Sigh, families can be tough. Number 4. Tutankhamun's mummy. No mummy in the world is as famous as that of King Tutankhamun. He was the boy king who died over 3,000 years ago, at just 19. The discovery of his tomb in 1922 by Howard Carter was quite an event. After uncovering a crypt beneath the Egyptian desert, Howard Carter spent 2 years working out its secrets. The greatest discovery lay hidden within the tomb's innermost chamber, a coffin. Inside it was another coffin, and then a third, a gleaming coffin made of solid gold. Laying inside was the mummified body of King Tutankhamun, untouched for over 3,000 years. Tutankhamun's mummy provided more than just artifacts. It provided details about the pharaoh's life and death. Sacred oils were used during the burial. This glued his body to the coffin, and rough attempts to pry it free caused significant damage. This sort of complicated effort to determine how Tut had died. For years, people's imaginations ran wild. Was the young pharaoh murdered? Perhaps poisoned? Modern technology, including 3D scanning, eventually revealed a different story. King Tut was frail, riddled with health issues, and had a broken leg. It also uncovered that Tut suffered from malaria and a rare foot disorder. Both of these likely contributed to his death. One can only imagine the disappointment that conspiracy theorists might have faced. Number 3. Great preservation. King Seti I was the one who set the stage for the reign of his son, Ramesses II. He was one of ancient Egypt's prominent pharaohs. He died at around 40 to 50 years old, after ruling for approximately 11 to 15 years. Seti's tomb in the Valley of the Kings is the longest and most intricately decorated. It features vibrant wall paintings and scenes from the Book of the Dead. It originally housed a magnificent alabaster sarcophagus, which is now considered a masterpiece of New Kingdom craftsmanship. Interestingly, Seti's mummy was not found in his tomb, but instead, it was discovered in 1881 in the Deir el-Bahari cache near Luxor by Emil Brugsch. This hidden tomb was used by priests to safeguard royal mummies from looters. It also contained notable rulers like Ramesses II and Thutmose III. Seti's mummy, though well preserved, showed signs of damage. This was most likely from ancient robbers. His arms, originally crossed in the Osirian pose, were stripped of their jewel. Even though the father lost to his son in many ways, the one place where he won was in the afterlife. King Seti's mummy is one of the best preserved we've seen to date. Whoever did such a great job with the preservation definitely deserves a raise, don't you think? Number 2. Chinese-European question mark. In 1990, China was in for quite a shock. Hundreds of mummified bodies were uncovered in the Tarim basin of Xinjiang, China. They were buried in boat-shaped coffins and remarkably well preserved by the desert's dry air. These Tarim basin mummies, which dated back around 4,000 years, had fair hair and distinctive features. This led early researchers to believe they were migrants from the West. However, a recent genetic analysis of 13 mummies revealed they were actually locals, with deep ancestral roots in the region. They weren't foreigners. The mummies were part of a Bronze Age population that lived in the area. They practiced agriculture, raising livestock, and constructing irrigation systems. Despite being culturally cosmopolitan, they remain genetically isolated. Their burial in boats is a very unique practice that we've not seen elsewhere. Well, whatever the reason was, it's buried now, alongside the mummy. Number 1. Mummy from the Roman era. In June 1975, the University of Manchester hosted a rare event, the unwrapping and dissection of an ancient Egyptian mummy, known as Manchester Mummy 1770. This was led by Rosalia David. The team of experts from various fields including Egyptology, pathology, radiology, and entomology examined the mummy using advanced biomedical technique. While the mummy's wrappings were initially given minimal attention, recent research has focused on them, revealing a largely complete garment, a simple bag-style tunic. Over the years, the Mummy Project team used X-rays and other methods to study the mummies in the museum's collection, learning about their age, sex, health conditions, and mummification technique. And that's all for today. Which one of these was your favorite mummy? Comment down below and let us know. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next video. Goodbye.